Some breaking news just as I hit record today. The Seahawks sign yet another safety as they look for any avenue possible to improve this roster, even the back end of the roster. I'll let you know who that is, and it's a familiar name to Seahawk fans. Of course, the big news of the week was the bigger safety signing. I'll give you a full reaction to the Julian Love deal, what I think it means for what the Seahawks are trying to build here, why he got paid as much as he did. We've got some key injury updates to pass along, and I'll put a number on what I think the odds are that Connor Williams ends up signing in Seattle after all. My early camp impressions today on Seahawks Forever.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
That's me. You can follow me on Twitter at Seahawks Forever. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit that bell button for notification of future episodes. And subscribe on any audio platform, wherever you get your audio podcasts. Leave a review or a rating there if you like what I do. There are other ways to support the show. I will put all those links down in the description. Wanted to give a big shout out today to Dave. You know who you are. He is a consistent and very generous contributor through Buy Me a Coffee. That link is below. And he towers above them all when it comes to supporting the channel through that method. And I really, really appreciated it. I always let him know on Twitter when he donates. Wanted to give him that big shout out and attention here. Attention on the Seahawks today is once again on the safety position. Not the biggest news in the world, but it's interesting because of who it is. John Boyle on the Seahawks official website, at least this is where I saw it reported first, reporting just moments ago that former second-round pick of the Seahawks, Marquise Blair, is back in the fold. It was reported that he worked out for the team a couple of days ago, and they actually signed him. And in doing so, also released Jonathan Sutherland. I'll touch on that in just a moment. Just first of all, to catch you up, Marquise Blair, second-round pick out of Utah in 2019, and really looked like an ascending, promising player his first couple of years. 2019 kind of took the Cam Chancellor path, where he was mostly a special team standout his rookie year. And then 2020 in training camp and early in the season looked like he was going to be a playmaker, a guy that was physical, a guy certainly that could hit. In fact, a guy that looked like might have to reel in some of that physicality at times, but a playmaker around the ball a lot, guy that flew around the field with reckless abandon. And then he had a couple of back-to-back knee injuries, tore the ACL a couple of weeks into that season, hurt his knee again the next year, never really got that explosiveness and dynamic quality back, ended up being released in 2021, caught on, played a couple of games with the Carolina Panthers, and then signed a futures deal at one point with the Eagles, but was released prior to last season. Spent last season out of football. Didn't play anywhere in 2023. And so you just don't see stories like this very often. So it's pretty cool, right? What makes it, I think, a little bit more than just a footnote is the release of Jonathan Sutherland. Undrafted free agent out of Penn State last year. And if you recall, had an outstanding rookie offseason. OTA's minicamp, and by the end of mandatory minicamp and even into training camp was getting some first team reps last year. Remember, Jamal Adams wasn't able to play in the preseason, wasn't fully healthy and able to hit the field until late in camp. So, what this tells me initially is that Jonathan Sutherland just wasn't a fit for what this new coaching staff wants to do at the safety position. That's all I can gather from it. Guys like Ty Okada have still made the cut and are still around. But Sutherland moves on. That would indicate to me that Marquise Blair might have an outside shot to make some noise. Uphill battle, very unlikely he makes the final roster. But I think it's a cool story just because you don't often see guys that go from, one extreme to the next and then come back from that again, right? A highly thought of prospect early in his career that looked like he was drafted to be a starting player and a significant player under the previous regime, and then horrible injury issues, out of football, being able to come back and at least get another shot at it. pretty cool to see. It is certainly, however, not the biggest safety news of the week. Of course, we're still sort of trying to assess and analyze the Julian Love signing. I think this is one that caught a lot of us off guard. There were some suggestions in the offseason that maybe he'd be a candidate to sign an extension. He had an $8 million cap hit this year. And back when the Seahawks were treading that line very, very tightly on available cap space, I know there were some suggestions that Love might be an extension candidate, that you might tack on another year or two and lower that $8 million cap hit this year. But I don't think anyone saw a contract this significant coming this early. 3 years, $36 million. No terms of the contract have been reported yet. It's interesting to me how in the offseason, during free agency and even the second or third wave of free agency, those terms are usually reported really quickly. And by terms, I'm talking about what's the real money? What's the bonus? What's the guarantee? Is it truly $12 million a year? Or is it less than that? Is the third year kind of a dummy year where there's not a lot of, you incur some dead money, but not a lot of guaranteed salary, so you can get out of it if you want to. And there's a reason for that. Usually in the offseason, those terms are leaked to reporters, and nobody's better at it than Aaron Wilson. If you don't follow him on Twitter, you should. By the agent. Because the agent, well, I take that back. The agent leaks the initial value, right? And then guys like Aaron Wilson either get the reporting from the Players Association or from team sources. So I'm not sure what the holdup on this is and why we're not hearing true value. I would expect that we would get it by sometime next week. But if you just take it on its face, 3 years, $36 million, $12 million a year, if you think that that's a lot, it is. It firmly puts him in the top 10. But it's not the top of the range, certainly. $12 million a year ties him for ninth with the Cardinals' Jalen Thompson and the Browns' Grant Delpit. Now, what's interesting to me about this is there was, especially early last year, Love's performance was pretty polarizing. There were quite a few people who thought that the early portion of last year didn't play well. There were some missed tackles. There were some coverage issues. Certainly the second half of the season, that seemed to change. And when you look at games he started versus games he didn't, overall the defense performed better. Certainly we remember some of the plays he made. He was huge in that Philadelphia Eagles Monday night game, the Drew Lock last-minute drive to win it with two late interceptions in that game. One was basically a punt, kind of a jump ball, almost a Hail Mary of sorts from Jalen Hurts, but the other one, he made an outstanding play on the ball. And then there were some hints this offseason that the team felt very, very strongly about him. And I've got some sound here I'm going to play, and I'll get into that in just a second. But I think what's interesting about where he fits in the safety structure is Jalen Thompson, Grant Delpit, both 26 years old, same age as Julian. Julian had to kind of work to make a name for himself more than those guys, though. Thompson, Delpit, a little bit higher draft picks, a little bit more of a known quantity coming out of college. Remember, Julian Love, a cornerback convert, mostly played corner at Notre Dame, a fourth-round pick, didn't start for the Giants his first 2 years, and then got his opportunity in his third year. But it's a major statement about how the team feels about him. And if you're concerned, and I haven't heard a lot of criticism per se or real negativity around this deal, there were some raised eyebrows, though, considering the fact that the Seahawks safety salary structure and payroll allocation over the last few years was so out of whack. They made the huge moves this offseason to move on from both Diggs and Adams, and now they turn right around and give $36 million to another safety. But I think this is a unique case. new coaching staff, defensive head coach, who's known for getting the most out of his players. And as much as he's been called the linebacker guru, look what he did with the safety position in Baltimore as well. Kyle Hamilton, a high first-round pick, also out of Notre Dame, was considered by many to be a disappointment his first couple of years. Not a bust, but a disappointment. Did we take the wrong guy? Was he drafted too high? Just wasn't making the impact on the field that people expected from a first-round pick. And then Macdonald came back from Michigan and changed Hamilton's role. Started playing him more towards the line of scrimmage, more as a nickel, kind of a robber, jack of all trades weapon. Moved him around a lot of versatility. Got the most out of him. Had a dynamic year last year. He also got the most out of a kid named Geno Smith. Geno Stone. Easy to make that mistake, right? Geno Stone, an undrafted guy, worked his way, undrafted or 7th round pick. I'm going to look that up because somebody in the comments yesterday, a couple days ago, when I dared to ad-lib something that I just wanted to add on that I didn't have in my notes, said that I was unprepared. Okay, he was a 7th round pick. I've confirmed it. But had to work his way up, that way, and then led the league in interceptions last year and parlayed that into a free agent deal with Cincinnati Bengals. And far and wide, Seahawk fans, when Mike Macdonald was hired last year, clamored for Stone to be signed. Some people wanted to pay a lot more, or were willing to pay a lot more than the Bengals ended up paying. 2 years, $7 million a year. But I think it's understandable because he really only had the 1 year track record. So I think it fits, again, not knowing the guarantees yet and the real true cash outlay. I think it fits when you start to listen to how the decision makers on this Seahawks coaching staff feel about Julian Love. I've got some sound here. First, I want to start with Love's reaction and what he says about what this deal means to him, and it's going to play perfectly into what Mike Macdonald has to say about him afterwards.
It's big time. Obviously, it's trust. You feel good when the guy you're playing for trusts you and believes in you. And from an early point, I know I talked to you guys a while ago. We hit it off. I think we connect in a lot of ways. I'm familiar with how he calls games in his past, and he's just a good guy to talk to and be around. And so I think we just connected, and I'm excited to play for him and to obviously now earn what I have going forward.
I think the key there is when he said early on he realized it was a fit. He and Mike Macdonald and that coaching staff and Leslie Frazier, and that's key here, so hang on to that for a moment, recognized right away that certainly they had analyzed all the film and they've seen what he can do on the field. So they liked him as a player. And then they were around him. And they saw how he conducted himself, how he went about his business. And I'm sure also how he absorbed the new scheme and all the installs and how he took to that. So piggybacking on that, here's what Mike Macdonald said yesterday when asked about why the commitment to Julian Love.
I like a lot about his game. Just really excited for him. I think it's a shout out to him and the type of person that he is, type of football player. Definitely the type of guy that we want here, and just excited for him. He's worked his tail off, and hopefully he's found a home here in Seattle for a long time. Julian's a guy that'll shoot.
Look, there was a gap with the departure of Bobby Wagner. There was an opportunity for players to step up and be leaders, and there are different ways to lead, right? We look to Devin Witherspoon to lead with his energy, the way he attacks the game, his physical style, the way he plays football, his enthusiasm and passion for the game. But is he a, wrap your arm around the guy next to you and bring him with you type of leader? Is that his style? In the way he goes about his business day in, day out? Is he a captain type? Don't know. But it sure sounds like Julian Love is. And remember, Mike Macdonald's been asked a lot this offseason about who's going to wear the green dot, who's going to call the defense. And in his defense, and the way he's executed it in the past, it's not always just by default the Mike linebacker. He mentioned the possibility that it could be someone from the safety group. The more you listen to these guys talk about Julian Love, the more I think it's possible he ends up wearing the green dot. A month ago, Leslie Frazier, assistant head coach and one of the most respected defensive minds in the league, went on the Move the Sticks podcast with Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks. And they were talking about how connected secondaries have to be and how that works and how elusive that can be at times and what goes into that. And without them asking him, Leslie Frazier offered up this little nugget to those guys.
All the secondaries I've been a part of, even when we were putting together in Seattle and we're talking about what we need to do well, Julian Love, who is an outstanding defensive back, who I think over time you guys will be talking about him a lot.
Yeah.
Tariq, one of our corners, young corners, who has a bright future. One of the things that we're trying to instill in those guys is a love for each other. And a respect for each other's games, because when you have that love and respect for one another, it has a chance to take your game to a whole nother level. And that's what I've seen with really good secondaries. Those guys, they don't get concerned that someone else got 2 interceptions. They didn't get any that game. It becomes a competition. You got 2 that game. Well, I'm getting 2 the next game. And they just feed off of each other with that same positive energy. And that's what you want when you're trying to develop a really strong secondary where, they all feed off of each other.
So you can hear it. It's not just his ability to play the safety position and what they want to do with their scheme that earned him this contract. Certainly it was partially that, but I think it was the intangibles. And I think they see him as a guy that could be a real leader on this defense. And now a leader moving forward. And we'll find out, is this a true extension? This is another reason I want to see the terms. A true extension, I saw one story where they said now they can count on Julian Love being part of this team through 2027. That's an assumption that's not necessarily true. More often than not, these 3-4 year extensions that are signed before a player's final year takes the place of that final year. They tear that year up. So that $8 million cap hit, either way, whichever way they do it, should come down significantly. What the Seahawks do with that money, we don't know. I'm going to touch on one idea here in just a moment after some injury updates, but it at least gives them some flexibility and some contingency if there's a deadline move that needs to be made, or maybe they just get to the end of the year and they have some cap space they can roll over into next year. More injury news, and almost all of it is good. For as nervous as so many people were, and maybe me included as well, because you just don't get the details until they hit the field, on all the names that were on the PUP list and the non-football injury list 10 days ago, 12 in total, only 3 remain. Nehemiah Pritchett, DJ James, both passed their physicals. The 2 rookie draft picks from Auburn, the 2 corners. Easton Gibbs, the undrafted free agent linebacker that a lot of people are high on out of Wyoming, removed from the NFI list yesterday. That leaves only Abe Lucas, Jarek Reed, the safety draft pick from last year, Drake Thomas, and Cam Young. 4 names. Reed and Thomas we know Reed's coming off an ACL, so that was expected. He'll likely start the season on the PUP list. I think Thomas is coming off an ACL too. We never got anything definitive. No one's ever pressed Macdonald on it because he's a guy, at the bottom half of the roster, but a guy that I thought had some promise when they signed him last year, poaching him off the Raiders practice squad. There's never been any details about it, but he was not seen in any practices, any OTAs, any mini camps, and now he's on the PUP list. That sure sounds like a significant knee injury for Drake Thomas. So I don't expect to see him in training camp this year. Cam Young, Macdonald was asked about him day one. He expects him back in a week. He says he's really close. So that's just a matter of time. And they weren't going to expect much out of Reed or Thomas this year anyway. So very, very, very good news on the injury front, except when it comes to Abe Lucas. If you haven't seen the show, the interview I did with Michael Sean Duger from The Athletic, outstanding Seahawks beat Reporter on Monday. Check that out. He really emphasized the importance of Abe Lucas. Said that he determines the ceiling and the floor of the offensive line. And that as soon as all the fluff questions were out of the way on day one with Coach Macdonald, he was going to ask how do things stand with 72? And I was hoping for something a little more promising. Remember, at the end of the last minicamp, the last press conference that Coach Macdonald did before they took their break, he sounded very optimistic and very positive about Abe, that he may be ready to go at the start of training camp. But this is what he had to say after the first practice when he was pressed.
It's tough with Abe. I mean, it's the thing with Abe that's tough is the guy works incredibly hard, and so it's a process right now. Timetable, it's like I can't tell you, but we're looking at it. We're trying to get there as fast as we can. I think it'd be fair to say that we were hoping to go a little faster up to this point, but we're in a process of bringing him back. I mean, we have a plan for him, but it's just you can't tell you right now on when exactly he'll be back. But as those things start to become clearer, we'll let you know for sure. So we're not trying to pull a fast one on you.
I don't know, guys. That sounds ominous at best. It doesn't sound great. It doesn't sound any better than what we heard from Pete Carroll last year before they decided to have surgery, when initially he said the MRI was clean and there was no surgical fix for it. And then later he used the word chronic. Last time I checked, I'm no doctor, right? I went to WSU for broadcast communications, not medical school. It sounds like a degenerative, chronic type situation where, we've never heard specifically what it is. A patella tendon, it's cartilage, it's ligaments. We don't know. We've never heard specifically what the procedure was. Was it something experimental or revolutionary? You remember when, I can't remember the name of the procedure now. And then it became pretty common when Jadeveon Clowney had his knee injury early in his career before he became a Seahawk. And there was the procedure where you drill into the bone to try to encourage growth in the area, to bring more healing to the area when it came to ligaments and cartilage. This sounds like a situation where we heard the optimism all offseason, even from those close to Abe Lucas, right? There was the one report that, Abe feels good about where he's at. And we saw the videos of him working out without a knee brace. Mike Macdonald did acknowledge yesterday that he is running full speed, at least straight ahead. And so we've heard him be definitive about other guys. He was asked about Jaron Reed, who's not practicing right now. And right after the Cam Young thing where he said, we look for him next week. He said, Jaron Reed, he thinks he's 2 weeks away. Like he's been much more positive about those guys. He was right about the linebackers when he told us 6 weeks ago that Jerome Baker and Terrell Dotson were on track to start training camp full speed. And even though they were on the PUP list, and so we all kind of took a deep breath, they were there on day one. This doesn't sound good. And the mindset I'm taking at this point is, if we ever see Abe Lucas back, at least even close to 100%, a guy that can still be a long-term answer at that position, I'm already starting to think about next year in the draft. It looks like it's going to be another good offensive tackle draft, as it seems to be just about every year now. That might be a major need for them moving forward. And very, very fortunate they were able to go out and grab a seasoned, solid veteran like George Fant. Interestingly enough, though, what this does to your depth is concerning, isn't it? George Fant's a great option, but he's on the wrong side of 30. If something happens to him, the number 2 right tackle on the depth chart at the moment is McClendon Curtis, who was running at right guard all offseason, but he did play tackle at Chattanooga. He's got the long arms. He's built more like a tackle. There's some questions about his lateral movement, his athleticism. Can he handle the edge? But that's where they're playing him right now in anticipation of having to build some depth behind George Fant if Abe Lucas shouldn't be able to go. But other than that, that's really the only bad injury news on the Seahawks roster. My next point that I wanted to make, and one of my impressions this week, I haven't let go of the Connor Williams thing. It has been all quiet on the Connor Williams front since Wednesday. But right after I finished recording the last episode where we talked about the Connor Williams visit, the fact he had passed a physical, that the news broke from Adam Schefter that not only had he passed a physical, but negotiations had begun with Seattle. So there was some hope when that first was tweeted out by Schefter that maybe they wouldn't let him leave the building, although his report did also indicate that some other teams were involved. We haven't heard a peep since. Not a peep. There's if you search Connor Williams on Twitter, you can find some other fan bases, the Chicago Bears fan base in particular, that want them to go out and sign Connor Williams yesterday. No other reports of visits, let alone interest. I think there's a very, very good chance that Connor Williams ends up signing with the Seahawks at some point. There's a possibility that this was a little bit of quid pro quo. And what I mean by that is that news broke the same day that the Seahawks signed Julian Love to his big extension. Julian Love and Connor Williams share the same agent. It's Drew Rosenhaus. Actually, the Rosenhaus brothers, I believe, run an agency together. There may have been a little, hey, mind if I tweet this out, your reported interest, or let my buddy Adam Schefter know that you're interested, to try to drum up some interest for his client. I think there's more to it than that, and here's why. And some of you are concerned already that, what this says about Olu Oluwatimi. I've said it before, said it in the last episode, I'll say it again. I'm bullish on Oluwatimi's future. I've said it. He may not ever be a Pro Bowler, certainly probably not an All-Pro, because he just doesn't have that dynamic athleticism. But I think he has very solid long-term starter upside. But this is a new coaching staff, not the one that drafted him. It's the same scouting staff, but not the coaching staff. You draft for the coaching staff you have in the scheme they want to play. He was taken in the 5th round for a reason, even though he won all the awards in college. There were other centers taken ahead of him. There was some indications that the Seahawks actually had targeted some other centers in the draft. John Schneider talked about some upsets on day 1 and day 2. There was some thought that they might have had a lot of interest in Joe Tippmann, who went to the Jets. Ricky Stromberg, can't remember where he went. These were guys that had much longer builds and were much better athletes as far as working to the second level, getting out and pulling, running wide zone. Oluwatimi, I played you the Schneider soundbite the other day talking about how stout he is. You can't move him. It's his base. He's a 5'4", 40 guy. Connor Williams ran a 5 flat 40. He was much more athletic. His RAS score, 9.5. Oluwatimi's was in the mid-7s. Centers like this don't become available very often. He's 27 years old, just turned 27. He would still be 27 in next year's free agency period when it begins. I think his birthday's in May. Coming off, he kind of an ascending player, was disappointing at times at guard, although he started a lot of games at left guard for the Cowboys, but they let him go in free agency, signs a 2-year, $22 million deal with Miami. They switch him back to center, his natural position where he played mostly at Texas, and he excelled. Top 10 in every category, according to PFF last year. They're number 2 overall center, number 2 in run blocking, number 7 in pass blocking, number 5 in pass block efficiency. Guys like this don't become available very often. The reason he's available is because of the injury history. So there's an opportunity here for the Seahawks to sign a guy that may fit better with the run scheme that we think Scott Huff and Ryan Grubb want to lean into, and that's wide zone, which requires movement skills from their interior offensive linemen, without breaking the bank. Some of you have suggested that maybe Williams would be too expensive, even coming off the injuries. Here's a little bit of context for you. Again, 2 years, $22 million on his last deal. But centers don't really get paid. The highest earning center in the NFL right now, Frank Ragnow of the Lions, his average annual value, $13.5 million. Number 2, Lloyd Cushenberry of the Titans, $12.5. There are only 5 guys in the NFL with an average salary of over $10 million at center, and only 12 of them making more than 5. I'm going to put the number at 60-40. I was tempted to go 70-30. I think this is going to happen. Maybe it's a cop-out to go 60-40. It just makes so much sense. It's not an indictment on Olumatimi. Again, different staff, different times. You don't get opportunities very often to sign a guy who could be an all-pro player at a discounted rate because of the injury. And I'm sure the negotiating happening right now is, Rosenhaus is trying to get as much guaranteed money for his guy as he can because he's had a couple of different knee injuries as a pro. He wants some security, while the Seahawks want to build in and bake in a lot of incentives. If they can get a contract that makes sense, gives him a little money up front, has some upside in case he becomes that player and he stays healthy, and maybe they're looking at something beyond 1 year instead of just a 1-year flyer, like, hey, let's get this guy in at a discount now, but let's also create the opportunity that he could be our starter moving forward if this works. I think it's going to happen. That's the way I'm leaning. That's why I'm going to say 60-40. It just makes too much sense. It really does. One of the other big impressions from this week, no matter who you talk to, any of the beat reporters that have been at practice the first couple of days, and remember, no cameras are allowed this year, so the only video you're going to see is from the Seahawks themselves, and they have put out some pretty cool highlights. Apparently the offense has hit the ground running, is banging on all cylinders. Geno Smith in particular looks incredibly sharp. I don't know that I've ever seen a quarterback put as much work in the offseason into working with his receivers. We would see Russ do it, but it was like he would take them on a camp for 2 weeks to San Diego or Hawaii, and they would do that early in camp, and then they would come back and have their mini camps. I never saw the late stuff after the last mandatory mini camp. But what have we seen for the last month during that break? Geno Smith's personal quarterback coach, Quincy Avery, sending out video. He's working with JSN and all of his receivers and DK. Chenault was there. Bobo was there in his helmet and shoulder pads. Also uncommon. Just throwing dimes. I get it, against air. The point being that he's put in, I think, an unusual level of work to make sure that this new install, this new offense, that they're all dialed in as much as possible when the bullets start to fly. And certainly through the first 2 days of camp, all indications are the offense looks great. And then my final takeaway impression of this week is I'm going to steal a phrase from the Mariners from 2 years ago. I know it's a little bit of a touchy subject talking about the Mariners right now, although they finally made a big trade. Love the Randy Arozarena deal yesterday. Arozarena. I better learn how to pronounce that properly. Good vibes only. Good vibes only. Look what's happening around the league. Look down the road. Look what the 49ers are dealing with, right? Not only the traditional Super Bowl hangover, as it's called, with the shortened offseason and some injuries, guys banged up and less recovery time and heightened expectations, all of those things. But two of their best players out of many. Now, granted, they have more good players than anybody in the league. They can afford, to have a couple guys standing on the sideline. Trent Williams is holding out officially and has been placed on, I can't remember the name of the list, but whatever list that is for players that haven't reported. I think they have to do that so they can start instituting fines. Trent Williams is not in camp, wants a new contract. Brandon Ayuk also wants a new contract. And so he's holding in, he's there, but he's not playing, trying to work out a new deal. So those players are looking for break the bank, top of the market type deals from a team whose Super Bowl window would seem to be shrinking because they're a year away probably from having to pay their quarterback. Maybe 2 years if they play it a certain way. So that's not ideal. It's not ideal. They're indecent. They do a really good job of managing their cap down there, but they've had to start letting some guys go because they can't afford to keep everybody. And so you contrast that with what's happening at VMAC. No offseason drama at all. No contract issues. No player conduct issues to speak of. No disgruntled players. Good vibes only. I can't imagine a better feel for how this changeover from one of the GOATs, one of the greatest good vibes guys of all time in Pete Carroll, to move on from him is a risk in some ways. The positivity around this team right now, is striking. And I think it's one of the big storylines for sure. Bullets are going to start flying soon. The mock game is a week from Saturday, the 3rd of August at Lumen Field. I will be there. If you're going to go, let me know. Hit me up in my DMs on Twitter at Seahawks Forever. I'd love to say hi, maybe have a sip of beer. During play, I'll be taking notes. Can't take video this year. I'll be taking notes so I can share my thoughts with many of you. But at halftime, after the game, would love to have, say hi, maybe get your impressions, fire up the camera. I'd love to get some thoughts, immediate thoughts from some of you after the mock game on Saturday about what you saw. I think that would be a lot of fun. Let's fire this up here. A little bit of a different feel as we take this one out today. Again, this is yet another new cut from Stephen Douglas and Company. A very, very good friend of mine from their upcoming EP. This is called Stomp. You can get it on Spotify, as well as the other songs that I've been playing. He's the one on harmonica. He's a great singer. You've heard some of that. He's also a very talented harmonica player as well, which you'll hear here. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell for notifications moving forward. Subscribe to whichever audio platform you get your audio podcasts on. Leave a rating or a review if you like what I do on YouTube. Make sure and hop in the comments. Join the discussion. Be part of the community. Every time you engage with the channel, it also helps with the visibility of the program. And of course, follow me on Twitter. I'm Dan. Thanks for watching Seahawks Forever. We'll end the show the way we always do. Forever and always. Go Hawks.